I am going to share images of work that inspires me. And I just have it on the timer so it'll run, and I'll say whatever I can fit in the 10 seconds that the picture shows. So it's a way of really keeping me from talking too long. So I made this in Keynote and then ended up having to, I'm going to show you the PowerPoint version. I think the formatting will be okay. Great. Oh, now I can't see. I was going to take a survey of who everybody is because I recognize a few people here. So an amazing thing about the Aboriginal artists of Australia is that there's a very compressed history. So we are able to see the rock art, the art in caves and in overhangs that relates to fertility and power relationships with animals. And then within 30 years, people move into making acrylic paintings. So the acrylic paintings that are made by the community in Yuendamu are very related to the body art, to the ritual, like this one that is unfortunately no longer being practiced, but is within the memory of living artists. And the designs that are done on the earth that are a spiritual kind of prayer in a way of keeping human beings in balance with our planet. So here's one of the wonderful artists who's finished painting, you'll see in a minute. And you notice he's working always on the floor because that's where the materials would have been laid out on the earth. So Paddy Jabulgari Sims is telling the story of his own family's relationship, origin with the earth in the dream time. And each of these paintings literally relates to a water hole. So it's a map of the earth. It's a way of passing on very important survival information. I happen to know that this Tibetan monk was just in Missoula last week, is going to be in Bozeman next week creating, in Helena, what he did was the mandala of forgiveness in the middle of the rotunda. It was very powerful, well attended, and after 4 days, he swept it all together and it dissolved in this powerful metaphor for our impermanence. So art in traditional cultures is totally related to our understanding of life and death. Here's a wonderful piece from Animating Democracy that is a continuum of civically engaged art. So an artist may be making a commentary on a social theme, or a little beyond that, stimulating dialogue, and not just artists, but curators, arts educators, culture workers, humanists. And then at the upper end of the spectrum, or you could say the left end of the spectrum, is art that's intended to inspire action. So we're not just representing every different point of view as in the dialogue realm, but really trying to change people. And this is really, like Raphael was saying, this is where art originates in Western culture as well. So, for example, in the Eisenheim altarpiece, designed for people who were in the hospital being treated with the plague, there's this identification with Christ and all his gangrenous wounds, but then that going up to heaven in a glow of light. We don't even usually think of somebody like Michelangelo as being very political, but when the David was put up, it was very controversial, had to be guarded from rock throwers because it threatened the power structure of the Medici and Rome. Vincent van Gogh also very, very socially concerned in some of his early work. And of course, Keita Kollwitz is one of the most outstanding artists, known for her strong anti-war work and her humanist concern. Probably the most famous piece of anti-war art is Guernica by Pablo Picasso. And so it's something that many artists refer back to again and again in our postmodern era. The existence of Yellowstone National Park as a national park is a result of the work of artists who brought Washington's attention to the value of these of these lands, as well as Ansel Adams, probably the most recognized photographer for his beautiful work of Yosemite, was politically motivated. Let's protect it. Jacob Riis, documentation of street children and basically homeless people. He was himself living in these conditions when coming to the United States. Or Louis Hine, a social worker who tirelessly documented the conditions of children, child labor, to make change. So photography has a long history. Farm Security Administration Project with Dorothea Lange was one of a team of photographers that really worked to get social programs for rural people. And I love how her image of the migrant mother has disseminated and become an icon. In fact, many of the photographs that started as pure journalism, for example, in the Vietnam War, have turned into icons and archetypes in our mind and been echoed by other artists, as in this poster art and babies, which was held underneath the Guernica painting in the Museum of Modern Art as a protest against the war in Vietnam. Of course, Charles Moore documented the civil rights movement. Those images changed people's mind because they saw what was happening. So photography's played a very powerful role, and artists like Andy Warhol have kept going with that. You know, speaking of postmodernism, he's really reflecting on how the media has shaped our consciousness. The Andy Warhol Museum, I've got a couple of examples of interesting exhibitions they mounted in order to stimulate dialogue. One on the issue of capital punishment, in which all sides were represented and the electric chair images were shown, but programming really attempted to emphasize and get people thinking. This is a really intense series. Without Sanctuary, a collection of lynching photographs which were shown there, and programming that went with it. Laura Nelson was a woman who was hung in Oklahoma, and this particular image has had an impact on us here. I'll show an example. Fred Wilson, mining the museum, juxtaposing artifacts from museums to really make us think and get us comparing how we care for things and present them, and what does it say about ourselves. Very interesting contemporary artist, one that's featured in the Art 21 series. And of course, few of us in the arts will ever forget the controversy around this particular piece by Chris O'Feely, in which, so you see why I have to have it on the time. You all remember that. Fernando Botero is probably the most respected Colombian artist, and I was really shocked when he took on the Abu Ghraib images, because he's been an artist who I hadn't seen a lot of political work from until this time, but it really does show you the world perspective kind of spinning in relation to the release of those photographs. I found the paintings really hard to look at. Oh, one of the most inspiring artists to me, Krzysztof Wodiczko, Polish-born, living in the U.S. now, designed this. It's like an RV for homeless people, with cooking and washing and sleeping, and can be pushed through the streets and really make a difference in people's lives. So I love that creative application. And this is, I think, some of the most important civic dialogue work. This piece projected at the memorial for the A-bomb in Hiroshima, and here's one, the Tijuana Project. This was a live piece where people told about their traumas, the women that worked in the maquiladoras. Guillermo Gomez Peña and Coco Fusco, of course, performance artists that really force us to question our perceptions of the other. And in this particular piece, Gomez Peña was dramatizing issues faced by immigrants. Suzanne Lacey, in this piece, is emphasizing how we need to listen to older women. And so that's what the people are doing. Of course, one of the most famous pieces, the AIDS quilt, very popular, very well known, having had a huge impact on consciousness raising, is interesting. And Maya Lin's Vietnam Memorial. She was only 21 and an undergraduate student when this piece was chosen. Thank goodness it was a blind jury, because she never would have gotten it. Here in Montana, thanks to Jane Wagner-Deschner, Adrian Arleo, and Phoebe Toland were two of the artists that listened to the stories of people who survived illness. The Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont really brought giant puppets into the political performance realm and has inspired a whole host of other puppet theaters. La Caravana Arcoiris, this is actually Penelope Vaquero, whose paintings will open at Bernice's at First Friday, and another Caravana image. Jason Gutzmer is also a Missoula artist who's worked with this traveling group through South America. And here's a current one, actually just earlier this month. How many of you saw these images? Wow. Amazing giant puppets. And the little Lilliputians here, the Royal Deluxe Puppet Theater from France. So this is on the 20th anniversary of the breakdown of the Berlin Wall and the reunification. And so the big giant is looking for his little niece. That they were separated by the wall. And so for a series of days, they're moving through Berlin. 1.5 million people in the audience over time. So that's a phenomenal kind of audience, which says to me, really, we need to take art to the people and to the streets. And I feel there is a great civic responsibility for artists, that if we expect that support, we also have, I think, obligations of relevance. And we all love stories. It's the human story that draws us in and opens our heart. Amina Robinson is amazing. She's a MacArthur Fellow from Columbus, Ohio, and she tells the Crowman tales. The Crowman is the griot, the storyteller of the community, and she is so prolific. She's made 2,000 books telling the story of Poindexter Village, which was built in Blackberry Patch, the African-American community of Columbus that got a federally subsidized housing. And so she's just sewn it all together. She's totally devoted to her place and telling that story. If you have a voice from a community that's been marginalized, simply telling your story is an important political act. Oh, this was taking guns and melting them down and creating manhole covers. I love that. So here's a transformation project that consumed me for a few years. Speaking Volumes, Transforming Hate, which opened at the Holter Museum, utilized 3,500 books by Ben Clausen, who thought Hitler was the hero, and they're white supremacist hate books that were transformed by over 100 artists. Ariana Boussard-Rifle, who grew up in Arlee, and you can see several pieces in the installation, which 1/3 of the artists were from Montana. It was a combination of invitational and juried exhibition. Clarissa Slide, one of my heroines, it was hard to send her that box of books and notes, and it was hard for her to open it because her uncle had been lynched. But she created this beautiful crown, and then she came to Montana for 2 months, and she worked with our students in Helena and did a residency at the Montana Artists Refuge and really shared her story. Jean Grosser took images from relatives who died in the Holocaust and created a series of memorials that are just, very, very direct, very heartfelt and strong, I think. Of course, the authors of these books and the followers, which are now called the Creativity Movement, you may have heard, have become very active in Bozeman and Billings. There's actually a counter demonstration on Sunday in Bozeman. Lee Curtis, Miguel Guillen, a gay artist in Seattle, is really looking at how hate is passed on generationally with his cookies. And so the whole Boussard-Rifle family worked on this house, and thank goodness it used up every last book. The Montana Human Rights Network was so happy because they had acquired the books. It's a long story, you know. But the show will be here in January, so you get a chance to see some selections from the show. Jean Quick-to-See Smith collaborated with her son Neil. Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes is a huge piece, 24 photographs relating to the historic educational program, Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes. And Betty Saar, another one of my heroines. This is an important piece. You know, when kids come into the show, they haven't seen this before. Or maybe none of us have really meditated on that enough. Richard Notkin, of course, a Helena artist, and you see references here to Guernica. And Lisa Jarrett, who is here in our midst, wonderful, wonderful artist, gave us this triptych and came over and did a residency. She's coming back to Helena to teach again. There's Laura Nelson. Laura Nelson was hung with her teenage son because the vigilante believed that her husband, who was killed, also had stolen a cow. Laura Nelson appears again in this beadwork piece. I cried when I opened that. And of course, you all know Steve Glukert. This is the rat race. When you turn the crank, the black rat and the white rat are in a race. Nobody wins. The black rat has a chain. And Nick Cave also using the target in his piece Profiling. This whole exhibition was really an opportunity to process a lot of our shared history, experience. Everybody has stories about their experiences. So it was a really exciting dialogue opportunity. Sarah Steele's painting based on the peace cranes that the children made with her in Philadelphia. So they're very beautiful pieces, transformative pieces. It was really an exciting exhibition to work on. It's traveling for 2.5 years. So in Bozeman now, here next, and then to Billings. Valerie Hellerman, who runs the Tibetan Children's Education Foundation, is inspired by the monks, the Tibetan monks who are very compassionate and forgiving. And wrapping up with Jane Wagner Deschner, she knitted hats for the books because she thought the white supremacists didn't get enough love and caring as children. So I did put a couple of my own pieces in here. I feel I'm here as a humanist, but I am an artist and very concerned with these same issues in my work. Cool Water Hula, 10 years ago. How many of you were there? Yay. Happening again. Christy Hager's here with us, and she's working with Judy Fiel to revive the Cool Water Hula, which was performed by 150 women and 10 men and 1 baby on the edge of the Berkeley pit. The hula is a prayer for clean water. It was so beautiful, and I think one of the most powerful art actions that got a great deal of national attention and is scheduled to be revived on the 10th anniversary, July 10 this year. So talk to Christy and start practicing. This is Sinuve, the giant Mother Earth goddess that a collaborative group of artists is working on. And Sinuve is starting to practice the hula. She will be there. She's starting to get it. It's a little challenging, but as we create Sinuve in collaboration, we also think about what do we want in a goddess. So it's a deeply communally, collaboratively spiritual process to think about what do we want to say for the earth at this time. I think you all know that we're living in a very critical moment, and it's really time to raise our voices and make ourselves heard, and we thought maybe a great big Mother Earth goddess puppet would help. So that's a little survey.